Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski.
Today, we're back in Pennsylvania with a guy who had a great career starting in the late 70s and through the 80s. National champion, Hall of Fame, both in his school and at the national level. Competed internationally for the country. Great career. We're going to hear the whole story today. Welcome on the podcast, Greg Beardsley. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Matt. Thanks so much for having me.
Greg, let's tell everybody your origin story as a competitor. When did you get first started?
I grew up in northwestern Pennsylvania, in a really small town, and I was the youngest in my family, so they tend to be sometimes very competitive because you have to be. I played baseball, I did basketball, but my mom started me in school when I was 4. So I was the smallest throughout high school, throughout all my schooling. But I always wanted to compete, and I wanted to be good at something and wasn't really good at much of anything. My first track experience took place in junior high school, 7th grade. I went out for track and I did not run. I did the high jump as the shortest kid on the team. Great plan. And the triple jump and the long jump. So I can still do all of those, which is kind of cool, but never really got into running until going into my 10th grade year in high school. I played freshman football in northwestern Pennsylvania. Football's big. Everybody went out for football. And even if you were a peewee little guy, and I just got the snot beat out of me. But the highlight of football was our coach made us run 2 laps at the beginning of every practice as a warm-up. I won every time. And I thought, but I wasn't paying attention because I wanted to play football. My friend said, Greg, you should run cross country going into my sophomore year. It was late in the summer. His brother was the captain of the wrestling team, was all gung-ho on, we're going to have a great team. And he was organizing runs all summer. I never had run a step in my life organized. I show up late August at his porch on a Tuesday night or whatever it was in a pair of cutoff jeans and a black high top Converse, Chuck Taylors, as everybody had Chuck Taylors. If you've ever been in Warren, where I grew up, it's very hilly. And we ran this monstrous hill, Liberty Street extension. I quickly was right at the front of the pack on day 1. And I thought, this is kind of fun. I ended up being second man on the team at the district meet, which ironically was held in Edinboro at Holiday Acres, brutally hilly course, the District 10 meet. And our coach, who at the time, my coaching in high school was less than top notch. Great people, but wrestling coach taught cross country, and my track coach was the basketball coach, which wasn't unheard of during that particular time. It was teachers trying to make an extra money through coaching. So my wrestling coach told me at the district meet, top 6 go to states. Top 6 go to states. I was the second man on the team, and I'd beat the first man a couple of times. At the district meet, our number 1 guy, who was a senior, was 5th. I was 6th. Oops. Top 5 go to states.
Oh, no. X+1. You learned about X+1 immediately.
Yes. So I'm the alternate, which in hindsight was like, okay, I got to watch the state meet. And I said, I want to run the state meet. It was a motivator. I came back my junior year and ran cross country again. I was undefeated, minus 1 loss to a senior from a local town, Craig also from Cranberry, who also went to Edinboro. Went to states. I was in the high 30s as a junior. Then my senior year, I won the District 10 championship and went to states and literally choked. Should have been in top 5. I don't think I could have won it, but I should have been in top 5. The kid I beat handily at the district meet was 6th. I literally choked. And after all these years now finally realized I had a panic attack.
Really?
Oh my gosh.
Because of your own internally?
I think I was very undercoached. Nobody had any kind of ability to coach the mental piece of the game and what you're going to feel and what you need to feel and this, that, and the other thing. So I'm standing on the line at the state meet by myself because my team didn't qualify. It was overwhelming. Just got super, super overexcited. In about half mile of the race, man, I could not breathe. I stopped.
Wow. How did you process that immediately afterward?
I think Coach Watts was pleased that I choked because then he had a better shot at getting me at Edinboro because he loved the local talent, so to speak. And Edinboro is 60 miles from where I grew up. That helped a lot knowing that I was going to go to Edinboro. And I had two folks on the team, two teammates, Brian Jordan, who was from my hometown of Warren, and Roy Shin, also from Warren. And both those guys were very instrumental in supporting me through that time and saying, come to Edinboro, you're going to have a great career. This is where you want to be. The program was in a little bit of a transition at that point in the late 70s from the NCAA days of the national championship teams that Coach Watts had. And a couple of them went away, moved or transferred to schools. Then he was rebuilding, but Brian Jordan was that kind of bridge, and he was from my hometown. So it was a no-brainer for me to go there.
Let's just frame that. What year was your sophomore year? Your first time you ran districts?
That would have been 1976.
What were the super runners from that area besides from your team?
Not that I really recall. When I was in high school, we were so disconnected. Rural America, I mean, I barely read the newspaper. Unlike today, where everybody knows everybody that's on the line, they know everything about them through the internet and through all the social media. It's crazy. Quite frankly, I'm glad I wasn't part of that. We had guys on the team when I was at Edinboro. Steve Dunham was a running junkie, but he knew everybody. You know who that guy is? He ran this mile in third grade. He could tell you everything. And you know who you just beat? I have no idea. But so none of the names really, I mean, I ran in Spence's era at the state level, in cross country. I have a couple of pictures in high school at the state meet. We're like pretty much side by side, but back in the pack because we weren't that front runner guy. We weren't that blue chip guy. Like I said, I was so undertrained and undercoached and unaware of the sport, maybe the worst ever.
You won your district by your senior year. How did you figure out how much to run? And were you paying any attention to the Olympic trials?
Nope. Was not paying anything. Truly. I mean, I had no conversation about Olympic trials until I was in Edinboro. Back in the day when you could still do this, I remember hitchhiking to Buffalo to watch the marathon trials. And Watts giving me a ride, not all the way home. He dropped me off at Route 60 and I hitchhiked back to Warren. Yes, different time. So I was really unaware of all of what was going on. I didn't get track and field news like a lot of guys did. I just loved to run. As far as coaching, I didn't even know what an interval was in high school.
Wow. Would you run the summer just for fun then?
Oh, I trained. I loved to train. And I loved growing up in Warren. It's rural, hilly, tons of dirt roads, just great places to train. No social media. I just ran. And I didn't run a lot of miles, but I always tried to make them count. That kind of thing came into play at Edinboro because when you went for a run at the borough with your crew, you were hammered. We hammered. And then you ran a lot of miles.
Did you have anybody else talk to you about potential college?
I'm a first generation college kid. So my mom and dad, neither one of them went to college. Neither one of them were involved with athletics. So the guidance from the home front, and I had a wonderfully solid, rock solid home front. My parents were both still alive and just wonderful that way, but they didn't have in their wheelhouse the ability to sit down and say, this is what we need to do. These are the places that we need to go visit. That wasn't part of the deal. At the high school level, even though it was a rural school, I graduated 450 kids and I wasn't at the top of the heap there. I didn't get a lot of guidance from that either. Roy Shin and Brian Jordan's father was a highly educated man. And I remember him coming over to my house, meeting with my parents and myself, talking about, this is why you should go to college. This is why you should go to Edinboro. This is why you should continue to run. This is why you should continue to race. It was phenomenal. And it was instrumental in my decision to go there.
That's great. How was the transition there? So you came up disappointing cross country in high school where it could have been on the podium. and going to Edinboro. Long did it take to get educated on the Edinboro running history of national champions and national championships?
About a week.
Yeah.
About a week. Camp week. We would go in mid-August before kids came on campus, and we would have camp week. And we would start the camp week at a local road race in Erie. Coach Watts would take us to the We Love Erie Day race. And he just loved to rub everyone's face in the whole idea that, look at these studs. We would go, top 10 people were from Edinboro or whatever. That was day one. And then we ran morning runs and afternoon runs. And the always culmination of camp was the camp half marathon. I went from maybe 50 miles a week, 40 miles a week, thinking that I was in shape and running. When my father picked me up at Edinboro after camp was over, after the camp half marathon, I could barely sit in the front seat. We ran 121 miles first week.
That's great. On that team, when you arrived, were both Roy Shin and Brian Jordan fit and on that? Yeah.
Yeah, we had Lance White, who was half miler from Delaware, state champion. Dennis Rice from North Allegheny was on the team. Steve Dunham from Delaware down in that area. But it was just kind of a transition team. He was trying to rebuild. Craig also was on that team. Scott Wilson. He was trying to bridge that. And I think Coach realized that I was kind of a diamond in the rough. And I just loved to compete. We had a great relationship, Coach Watson, from the standpoint, you're the coach. Tell me what you want me to do. You want to run hundreds or whatever you want to do crazy, we'll do that. You want to run mileage, we'll do that. You're my coach. So I trusted. And I tell that to kids all the time. You got to believe in your coach. If you don't believe in your coach and you think you know more, or their parents think that they know more than the coach, you're not going to materialize into the runner that you really could be. Plus, I didn't have to worry about it. I had enough to worry about with classes. Just tell me where you want me to be around the mountain, whatever workout we're doing. It worked out well for me. I ran some good races as a freshman. My freshman year, we went to Notre Dame. I ran pretty well there. I think I was 11th at Notre Dame. And that was after Coach Watts allowed the team, probably not one of his best decisions, the night before the race to go to a concert that was on campus, because that was always a Friday race. We were there early, ran the course on Thursday, and realized Styx was playing on campus on Thursday night. Please let us go. Oh, he let us go. It didn't work out well. But so
it worked out well for you, though. Yeah.
It did work out well for me. When you want to quantify time wise, I was 4:35 miler in high school, 9:30, 9:28 2-miler. My freshman year in track, I ran 4:16. That's a pretty significant jump. But you got to realize my freshman year in cross country, I'm 17 years old.
Right. Yeah.
And not a mature 17.
Yeah. That puts you right on the PIAA podium a year or two later with running those times. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And then, so when I won the NCAA Division II national championship, I was 20, which is crazy.
Well, I want to talk about some of those specific races and your memories there, but let's just get a little bit more background of you adjusting to life at Edinboro. Did you ever go home? How'd you pick your major? How'd you adjust to academic life there?
Growing up in a rural area, I love to hunt. I love to fish, spent a lot of time outdoors. And I really enjoyed biology in high school. I had a great biology teacher, Nancy Clapp, who was truly motivationally inspiring. When I went to orientation, what's your major? I signed up to be a bio major. So I was a biology major, and I still love that. As far as the transition into the program, the biggest transition was the mileage, the jump in the amount of mileage. And that came a lot through the morning runs. You start running 5, 6, 7 miles a morning run just to get rolling. That adds a lot of mileage to your log. What really helped me was those people like Roy Shin, Steve Dunham, and Brian Jordan. Those guys were relentless in making sure that you were trained. I know that Coach Watts talks about this all the time. You didn't go to Coach Watts every day. You had practice a couple days a week. And the rest of the time, 4:00, here we go. Pretty much once you jumped off the porch, you were rolling. Looking back, I think we left a lot on the roads. If we'd have trained a little bit smarter that way, and I think that was a disconnect between coach and the team. Because sometimes you get 3 or 4 competitive guys and somebody makes a move. Oh no, somebody makes it. Next thing you know, you're cranking, 5, 11 miles on a training run. Not always the brightest thing to do, but that camaraderie and that team thing, and throw in the fact that Edinboro is in the Great White North, right in the heart of the snow belt. I mean, it was brutal, but we never missed. You would go out there in between training on roads that weren't quite plowed or plowed and sanded with the wind. We used to call that the multi-directional wind. Anytime you turned a corner, it was in your face. It just like, it can't be in the face. We just ran 5 miles in this direction. It's got to be at our back at some point, and it never was. Those were great bonding times for the team and just going through all the mileage, but we didn't run fast in the winter, obviously. And we didn't have an indoor track. We had Macomb Fieldhouse. I think it was 16 laps when they put the bleachers back after the basketball game. We would have indoor track practice 11 o'clock at night. Crazy.
Wow. Some great historic runs and courses, Chicken Hill and your Cerruti run, and Watts was the devotee of the science of training. Did you have any injuries at all in that first year?
No, I think back, I started with the Chuck Taylors, of course, and my first pair of running shoes were, I think I still have them because I'm kind of a hoarder. I have a huge barn to just throw everything in there. Anyways, they were a pair of blue Tiger Nairobis, the paper thin ones. Like,
Wow.
oh, wait a minute. You put those bad boys on and it was just, you just felt fast, but that was my first pair of running shoes. First pair of running shoes I had at Edinboro. Watts gave me a pair of car hooves. They were Finnish. Remember those? They also
Well,
make,
I remember that not many people had them.
oh no. Oh no. And I love that because I know Coach Watts is kind of known for allowing that individual to just flourish and do their own kind of thing. That was right up my alley. I had the long hair, but I watched, the Fosters and the Muggles and those guys. I thought, that's for me. He gave me those car hooves with the first pair of running shoes I had. And if you've ever had a pair of car hooves, they are just stiff as a board. So I think about some of the shoes that I wore. I'm amazed that I didn't get hurt. The only injury ever in all my years at Edinboro, on a morning run, I rolled my ankle on a rock down by the cemetery. But I had a race in Tennessee in like 3 days. I wore an air cast.
Wow. Until the race.
To, no, in the race because it was the steeplechase.
Right.
I never liked track. I didn't like track. I was a cross country guy. It was much purer to me. Once my freshman year rolled around a track, Watts threw me in this makeshift steeplechase indoors. We had this indoor meet, just our own team. It was called the Al Hall Freedom Games. Al Hall was the athletic director, I believe, that brought Watts to Edinboro from Ohio. He would have this Al Hall Freedom Game. And I just wanted to go home because you asked the question, did you go home? My freshman year, I went home a lot. If I wasn't racing, I put my varsity jacket on, baseball cap, put all my hair up under, got out of Route 6, put the thumb out, and hitchhiked home, which is insane. And then I hitchhiked back on Sunday. But the Al Hall Freedom Games, the first event, and you could go after you were done running, he had this makeshift steeplechase. And I said, I'll do it. And it turned out it was a really good race, a really good fit for me because I had not outrageous speed, I had enough speed, but I had a lot of strength. I mean, I ran hills all my life. And that turned out to be my best race in college was certainly the steeplechase. And then I morphed after college into being more of a 5,000 meter guy.
I still want to get into these races because there's some fascinating stories of what happened. But what about your freshman year, say after Notre Dame, goal setting, personally talking with Watts, projecting into the future? How soon did that take shape?
And I share this story frequently as an administrator and as an educator. I've talked to a lot of students over the years, and he was doing begin with the end in mind long before it was in vogue. And he would do this not only individually, but also as a team. And he would say, okay, you know what? It's not about Notre Dame Invitational. It's not about Springbank International Road Race up in Canada. It's about, we want to run solid here. But we're really, really looking forward to going to the regional meet. And our goal is to be top 5 nationals or to win nationals. That was what we were training for. So then you just build backwards and you build your whole season based on what that goal is. And I've spent my whole academic career doing that. Whether I'm a principal at the middle school, it's all about what is the goal? How do we get there? Building it backwards. A lot of people made a lot of money doing that, but Doug Watts was doing it a long time ago. I think the first year he was just he would just say, just go run, Beardsley, just go run. And I think he was just kind of getting a feel for how crazy I was or how crazy my racing style was, because my strategy was very simply, when a gun goes off, run it as hard as you can for as long as you can. And when you die, you die. But you get in good enough shape, you can run really fast for the entire race. You'll do really well.
You mentioned coming across the border. Is that the first time you left the state?
Growing up in Warren, we would go to Niagara Falls all the time. I'd never been to Toronto and had never been to Springbank International Road Race. That was just one of the highlights of the season. I'm still very good friends. Matter of fact, this past week, when you texted me on Friday night, I was at my hunting camp with 3 ex-Edinboro guys that ran with me.
Let's assume they had permission. Who was there with you?
Craig Oswald was the other kid that I ran against in high school, and then he went to Edinboro. Jeff Brick, who ran up in New York State, he was a good miler in high school and had a good career at Edinboro. Then he had to transfer. And Carl Leonard, he was after my time, but we'll get into that. I came back to Edinboro and I trained there for a while. So I have a lengthy group of guys, more than normal, just because I was there for longer than 4 years, so to speak.
All right.
Springbank was a highlight of the season. It was in September always, and they had 2 races. They had a 4-miler and a 12-miler. And Watts made all the freshmen run the 12-miler. And oh my gosh, I can remember going to Ponderosa afterwards, and I was in so much pain. It was just like, oh my God, this sucks. But we all survived it. Later in my career, I would jump in the shorter race, the 4-miler, because I was mature enough to run against the Michigan boys and all the speed, and did well. I was on the podium a couple of times up there.
Let's jump to one of your most kind of historic races, was the Snowstorm National Championship. What do you remember about traveling there, looking at the weather forecast and planning all that out?
It was up in St. Cloud, Minnesota. You're talking November 13th, 12th, something like that. I don't know
Who picked that? Who picked that? No, I mean, I've been to St. Cloud.
This will be a good time to be up here. I remember going to the course the day before, and then everybody just, the buzz was the weather. The forecast was, oh, they're going to have to cancel that. There's supposed to be a blizzard blowing in tonight, and there's just no way we can run in the snow, blah, blah, blah. Well, all that came to fruition. But in preparation of that, Watts went to JCPenney's and bought me a pair of black Danskin pantyhose. And I wore those, and I had so much hair. I think I was probably the only one on the starting line that didn't have a hat on. I just took gobs of Vaseline and just lathered my ears up and put my black tights on. And I believe I had a turtleneck on, a white turtleneck underneath my burro stuff. When I saw the weather that morning, I'm going to win this race. I mean, this is another, long run in January in Edinboro, and it was brutal. I mean, it was 15 degrees and windy. There were parts of the course, there was no snow, and there were parts that were 2-3 foot drifts. In about 3 miles, I made a break in, I think it's the largest margin of victory of any NCAA race ever, 61.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So did you know, at what point did you know the lead had gone to probably not coming back?
It was interesting because our regional meet the week before was, I believe it was in Philadelphia. And Brian Ferrari from Cal, he had beat me, and Petrini from Slippery Rock beat me. So I was third at the region meet, but I was just paying attention to how they raced. And at 2 miles, I tried to make a break and got a little bit away from him. And then there was a part of the course where you kind of made a real sharp turn, and it was like where did they go? Did I make a wrong turn? And they just didn't, I don't know, mentally, but I was into it and it was just awesome. And I remember it was just a great feeling, you know.
I had that happen at a conference meet in high school. And I did that. I won a meet in my junior year. And I turned around and said, "Oh my God, I must have cut the course." How long did that last in your brain?
It seemed like forever.
Yeah.
Until you come down a part of the course where you start seeing people where they're
Yeah.
supposed to be. They, okay, this is good. It was just a crazy experience. It was just total euphoria. I can remember Watts coming up and giving me a big hug, and he wasn't a hugger. I mean, he didn't, in all the years I ran there, he didn't give me a lot of compliments over those years. There was always something you could have improved on, but I didn't need that. I wasn't one of those guys that needed that kind of, I just took it critically and just said, okay, well, we need to get better. But he was elated. It was just awesome. It was a great time.
How were your teammates? It sounds like the camaraderie there, as all the way starting from the 70s, Edinboro had such a team spirit, maybe brought on by tradition, maybe brought on by Watts.
And I, it's ironic that word tradition that kind of defines the whole program under Coach Watts. It was the runs that we did were tradition, the workouts that we did that were tradition, but it was a tradition in a different way. It was never anywhere close to like, you got to do this as a freshman. It was just, that's part of what we do here. You know what I mean? And there's a difference. It wasn't hazing in any way, shape, or form. It was just traditionally, this is what we do. That was really a formative thing for me at Edinboro. But as far as the team at the national meet that year, oh, they were great. One of the guys I was at the camp with on Friday night, Jeff Brick, Buffalo, he was on that team. And I remember him coming up and giving me a hug. In those bonds, here we are 40 years later. We stay in touch. As a matter of fact, Coach always tells us, this group that I'm with, he goes, you guys are the tightest over the long haul than any group. But just like any other relationship, it takes work and we communicate with each other and social media and all that. It's been a great ride that way with those guys. And I think that's what made my Edinboro experience so special. I got a great education, all that, but those friendships and bonds, huge.
Let's talk about the competition a little bit. How was your relationship with these runners that you would meet at the big meets? Ferrari, Petrini, other teams, Edinboro reputation. Winners are not always loved by the people that aren't winning.
Petrini and Ferrari, I had a really great relationship with them and still do. Not so much Petrini, but Ferrari, I still stay in contact with him. He lives down on the Chesapeake and the Ohio towpath, mile 93 mark. That's a whole nother story. I had a good relationship with him, and even after we were graduating, we ran on the roads for years. We had a lot of good races over those times, but we're very different people. We came from very different programs. We were the wild child, and yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Well, let's move into track. And before we talk about races, specific results, let's talk about falling in the steeplechase.
At the national championship in Cape Girardeau, had that one race. That race was in the back pocket. It was myself, Mike Venata, and Carmelo Rios from Cal Poly SLO. Venata was a hometown boy. He was Cape Girardeau, Southeast Missouri. And it was the finals in the steeplechase. We all had run really well in the semis. With the lap to go, we were right there together. But I felt like I hadn't even started. I just was really in the zone. And going down the back stretch, I said, okay, it's time. So I just cranked it up, really cranked it up, and came into the last water jump, just hammering, and missed a step. My lead leg caught the barrier, boom, right into the water. Couldn't believe it. Got up and, well, because Venata and Rios jumped over me basically, got up and finished third, but oh my, it was crushing. That was brutal.
Yeah, I think that race is out on YouTube. People can see it. Yeah, you were moving at a different pace on that last lap. This is like watching the Kentucky Derby and somebody coming around on the bet saying this race is over already. And yeah.
Oh, and that's exactly the way it unfolded. Afterwards, my mother told me that she had a premonition that I fell. I said, I really wish you wouldn't have come.
Yeah.
But my mother, she's a wonderful woman, but just a real quick side story about people say, where do you get your competitiveness from? My mother's a competitor, never did anything athletically, but she is a competitor and expected you to kind of win. I was running after I graduated from college. At the time, I was running for Nike with the Peachtree race, 40,000 people, 10,000 meters, come through that 5K in 13:44, and there's 25 guys. I'm just hammering, right? And still ran it very well. I was sixth place, first American, first Nike athlete. I was feeling pretty good. And that was still early enough where when I got back to my hotel that night, I called my parents, collect. Only some people would understand that. But, and my mom answered, she goes, how'd you do? And I said, man, I got sixth, first American. She goes, oh, you lost. I said, well, you got me there, Mom.
Listen, let's talk about the steeplechase where you didn't fall and it was neck and neck at the finish line. What happened there?
That was my junior year. It was in Sacramento, under the lights, beautiful night. My junior year was kind of my coming out year in track. That was kind of my year of, okay, I'm pretty good on the track. This steeplechase, I'm running pretty fast. I remember it's finals week, a couple weeks before that national meet, and we had a meet at Penn State, Nittany Lion Open or Nittany Lion Relays. And Coach Watts picked me up at Cooper Science Hall in the van because I had a final that morning. We had to get right in the van and cruise down there, jump out of the van. I think at that time I had run 8:55, I think was my PR. And I was just exhausted from studying and doing all that stuff. Get on the track, and a bunch of my high school friends came. They were saying, oh, this Ricky Garcia guy, this stud, he's going to clean your clock, all this stuff and whatever. I beat him and ran 8:40. And it was just like out of nowhere. So I thought, was that a fluke or is this starting to happen? And so then we went to the national meet through the semis and whatnot, got to the finals. And I think looking back, I tactically didn't run the way I probably should have because I didn't have the confidence to do it yet, if that makes sense.
Well, you had a fast finish and maybe another 50 yards, you would have finished first.
Right. Yep. At that point, all of a sudden, I just felt like, okay, track's good for me. But I really hadn't, I've dabbled in all the other races, but my focus was more or less the steeple. But then the year that I fell at the national, that was my senior year. You didn't have time to think about it because 3 weeks later with the tack meet, ran 8:26. So that was helpful because you know what it's like after you have something like that happens catastrophic. You either fold your tent and go home, or you have to pick up yourself and say, okay, on to the next race. And I think coach was very good at always next race. Okay. It didn't work out. Let's go. We're doing this Monday.
And your career took you a lot of places. You went overseas into Japan,
Mm-hmm.
the national team. One thing I wanted to talk about is your career through the Great Race. I think you spanned the time when it's a really good result, no money. And then money came. What was that transition to money and how were you thinking about that?
After I graduated from Edinboro in 83, I went home for the summer. And then a friend of my father's who was living in Southern California at the time said, hey, if Greg wants to continue to train out here, I'd love to have him. So I went out to Southern California in the summer of 83. That was the first time I had left Northwestern Pennsylvania. I was living with this really good friend of his, no coach, no training partners, living in Orange County in Irvine. So I figured, okay, I got to figure this out. So I got a bike and I started riding my bike over to UCI. This would have been the summer of 84 Olympics, right? So, oh my gosh, Dwight Stones is practicing the high jump. Edwin Moses is on the track running hurdles. I'm thinking, oh, this is kind of a good place to be. There's got to be some distance running. I started training with Tom Wysocki from out west and met some really cool people out there, but did not enjoy the West Coast to live and to race. So a year later, I came back summer of 84. Somebody said, you should run the Great Race. I just got back, started running with Watts and the team again. That was in August. So great race is late September, go down there and I win it. And really a life changer for me. And you can't say too many races are life changing. That was life changing because the first year I won it, I won this massive trophy, whatever, but I also won a trip to Barbados.
Ah, yeah. Was that part of the Great Race prize?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So I raced in September, won a trip to Barbados, flew to Barbados in December. While I was in Barbados, which was beautiful, they had a 10K road race on the island. So I'm jumping in. So I won. I ran like 29:20 or low 29s or whatever. But I beat this guy from West Germany. And there was a lot of people just spectating, right? After the race, this couple comes up to me, American couple, probably in their 40s at the time. And they said, "Oh my gosh, we're so happy an American won. Oh, we want to take you to dinner. Please come out to dinner with us." And I said, "Well, I can't go out to dinner because the prime minister had invited me out to dinner of the island." So I went and had Dom Perignon with him and Caribbean lobster. It was the whole meal deal. Got back to my hotel, which was named Treasure Island. It was on the other end of the island of where the race was. So I told these people, if you want to hook up afterwards, there's a steel drum bar right across. Let's just meet there like at 9:00. So they did. So I went into this bar facility with these people that I didn't know. They were from, of all places, Minnesota. Good state to me. So we sat there and talked and just getting to know one another. They were very, very wealthy. They said, "Well, we want to sponsor either by a racehorse or a race car, but we saw you run. We would like to help you out. What do you need?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "We want to help you out." And I said, "Okay, Fantasy Island, where's the little plane with all that guy?" And they said, "No, no, 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 we want to help you out." So I said, "Okay, sure." The night goes on, we leave, it's late. We've been there a long time. And they said, this is before Ubers and all the rest. I said, "How are you going to get back to your hotel? It's the other side of the island. You're going to call a cab." You walk out of the establishment. They had the taxi wait. We were in there for like 4 hours. I get back to Edinboro 2 weeks later, and it snowed and got back from a run, checking the mailbox, and there was a letter from them. And inside was a plane ticket to Eden Prairie, Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis. And flew out there, met with their attorney, and they sponsored me for 2 years.
This is a private deal
Right.
with
Private.
sponsorship. And your trip to Barbados was not to race. It
No.
was just here's a go on vacation.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah,
And
that's
and
an
s
interesting twist. I didn't know those details. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
I continued to live in basically what I told them I needed was, I said, "What do you need from me, Natl? We want you to wear our stuff, Essex Incorporated." So for the next 2 years, I had all these singlets printed up and stuff for Essex, but I was running for Adidas at the time. So I got all my stuff, my gear from Adidas, and then all my other stuff was just Essex. They had a business down in Florida, so they'd fly me down to Orlando, pick me up in a limousine, take me down to Zero Beach. I'd run some little rinky-dink 5K, run 14 flat and win by 5 minutes. And they just thought, "This is wonderful." Then I'd go out to Minnesota and run a race, and then I would run whatever races I want, and they would pick up the tab. And they paid for all my expenses. I gave them a budget of what it cost me to live in Edinboro at the time, which was next to nothing. It was the gravy train, man. It was like being retired at 24. It was awesome. And then unfortunately, they parted ways and the business went, but I got 2.5 years worth of that ride. That was phenomenal. So I just got to be a road machine, a racing machine. It was a lot of fun. So that Barbados trip got me there. I would just get the Racing South Journal, see what they were paying for the winter, and I would map out. And that was just a road whore for a couple years, which was a lot of fun. I got to see a lot of places, meet a lot of really great people. Then I got back into track. When I lived down there, I didn't know anybody. I moved down there in January, right after the Charlotte Marathon. And this was just what you had to do if you wanted to connect with people. Yeah, I mean, no internet, all that stuff, pre-internet. So I went to the newspaper, looked at the results of the Charlotte 10K in the Charlotte Observer, went through, found the first person that lived in Charlotte, found their number, called them up and said, "Hey, just moved to town, looking for someone to train with." And unbelievably, The guy I picked worked for Nike. Crazy. And we would be doing workouts and he goes, "Who do you run for?" And I said, "I'm kind of unattached right now." And he goes, "I got to show you something." So that's how I ended up being sponsored by Nike. And that was before the 88 Olympic trials, because I ran the 88 Olympic trials. Another interesting thing that happened during that time, Matt, was I got involved with the Colorado Springs at the Olympic Training Center. They had the elite distance program and they were trying to profile the perfect distance runner. Oh my gosh. I still look at that data. It was insane. The stuff that they collected on us, nutritional information, psychological profile, force plate profiles from Dr. Kavanaugh out of Penn State. We worked with Dr. Jack Daniels, the exercise phys guy, all of it. And they were trying to figure out, okay, if we were to build the perfect distance runner, what would they eat? What would they look like? How would they think? And basically the data set after 2 years, it's all over the place.
Let's talk about nutrition. At what point did you care about what you ate?
Never. I mean, quite honestly, I remember sitting with the nutritionist out there at Colorado Springs, and she just looked at me and she said, I don't know how you race as fast as you race, but I've always been very blessed with a very high metabolism. When I moved down south before the trials, one of my good friends was a chiropractor who was very, very bright. He helped me with nutrition and just being more efficient with what I'm putting in my body and more effective with what I'm putting in my body, but never really tapped into that side of it. I remember when we went to Colorado Springs, Fitzinger was there and he was like a machine. He ate perfectly and he really took care of all of that. And I was just like, wow, that takes so much discipline. I would just run and get hungry and eat what was around.
Are you still in touch with him in Auckland?
No, but it was that in strength training. We never really did much of that either. And I think there's a lot of that kind of that cross training philosophy more so than we just ran. I mean, we just ran. I mean, that's what we did.
One thing, Watts was a pulse checker. What was your resting pulse back then in the best times?
It was in the low 40s, but probably more impressively, when I would go to the Olympic Training Center, they would do the body fat analysis. I had at least a body fat whole count. It was always like 2.5%. Seeing, I was a bone rack, but different times.
When you think back, having the talent, maybe the distribution of fast slow twitch muscles, jumping and steeplechasing. Now looking back, it's like, yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about the steeplechase, Watts was very good with the distance in that application. My hurdle form was less than efficient. And had I been a better hurdler, had more coaching from that side of things, I think it could have been a very dangerous situation. I know I had the speed and the endurance strength side of things to run with all of those dogs.
Yeah, you kind of went over extra high, huh? On the barriers.
Oh, all the time. And I would chop my steps. It wasn't anything but scientific or efficient. There was a guy on the team. I should have just had him teach me how to hurdle. Stu Shoskin. He was awesome. But yeah, no.
What was the course of the Nike sponsorship then? How did that start, progress, and come to an end?
Through my contact that I made in Charlotte, he introduced me to some people. They said, yeah, we would love to have him. So it was pretty much just shoes and clothing. I got a few checks from them over the years. Like the year I was the first Nike athlete at Peachtree, that was right before the 88 trials. That was pretty much how I bought my engagement ring. Then I ran for them through the trials. And then in the spring of 89 is when I decided I can't run a race forever. I got to do something. So I got a job in the Northeast School District as a 7th grade science teacher, then moved into administration, and I spent my entire career in that. I'm still here.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, it's wonderful.
At what point did you become a fan of the sport on the world stage?
When I started being a serious contender for qualifying for the Olympic trials, then you start to really pay attention to track and field news and the sources that give you, okay, I know what Brian Deemer's running up in Michigan. I knew what all the boys are running. And I have the personality I can't do too much of that because then it becomes obsessive. right? And counterproductive. I educated myself enough to know what people were running time-wise and what they were capable of running. But I never really got much beyond that. I just loved to see what I could do with my own talents.
But let's talk about your Olympic trials experience psychologically. By then, you used to win and coming across the line first. What's the experience when you got to that stage?
When I moved down south, again, I found myself similar to when I went out west. I didn't have a coach. I had some people I could train with, but not so much at the level that I was training, right? I knew it was in Indianapolis. I knew it was going to be hot. I knew it was going to be humid. I was living in Charlotte. It doesn't get hotter or more humid than Charlotte. And I had access to a all pavement track. It was kind of close in my neighborhood. And I was coaching myself, but I was much wiser about what I needed to be doing with intervals and all the things that I needed to be doing. I would go to the track at 2 o'clock in the afternoon just to prepare for the heat. And there were days it was well over 100 degrees on the track. So I was kind of psychologically ready for that. I felt like I was really ready to roll and made it through that first round at the trials. And then the second round of the trials, I did make it to the finals, but I don't think I could have come any closer. I mean, it was right there, and wish I had that race back, but I was very proud that I got to that level pretty much on my own. There were a lot of guys in athletics west and that were well coached and well groomed to be in that position. And I was as competitive as I could be with them. But psychologically, you just had to prepare yourself to know that you're going to have to run 3 really fast, crazy, outrageous races. Some very strategic, others not so strategic. And then, they have the heats. Sometimes you got the luck of the draw. Sometimes you didn't. But I was ready to do that. I'd run 13:36 that year, low 13:30s. That's all good. I qualified up at Northeastern at a twilight meet. And I think I ran 13:40s, but the year before I had run 13:30s at 10 relays. And that was another mental boost from being part of that Colorado Springs elite program. I mean, sitting down with Jack Daniels, having him tell you based on your blood work and all of the other metrics that they had on you, you should be going back to Edinboro and you're going to run 20 flat in a 10K. You're going to run 13:30 in a 5K. And I'm thinking, I think you got the wrong data here. Matt, it was scary accurate.
Oh, interesting. You have a couple of more unique experiences competing for the country, traveling overseas. I want to just ask you the logistics of that. Traveling when you went 10, 11 time zones away, what was the travel schedule there and how'd you adjust?
I was living in Charlotte at the time, and the national team was going over to compete in the Ekiden, one of the relays. And I was running a 5,000 meter leg. I got selected to be on two of the 5,000 meter leg. I flew out of Charlotte to Atlanta to Dallas to LA. And we spent some time in LA as a team because it was men's and women's. We had some professional development, so to speak, in the culture and where we're going to go. Then we flew from LA to Tokyo. The race was in Chiba, which is north of Tokyo, still really large, lots of people there. We stayed in a really cool place called the Nihon Aerobic Center. It was like a country club. There's not a lot of country clubs in Japan. And this was a really swanky place. There were 17 teams there, international. And we all ate the same dining facility every night. And they cooked for everyone, whatever you needed, whatever you wanted. You'd sit with the South Koreans. I couldn't speak. They couldn't understand. And we could communicate. It was really cool. They had some social and engaging activities for all the athletes. It was a wonderful experience. Then the day of the race, I don't know how many millions of people lined the race course, but they were like 12 deep, the whole course. It was insane. Then we went back to Tokyo and spent a couple of days. And I tell this to my students all the time, especially at the K-12, when we're talking about the importance of being able to read. We were sightseeing and a couple of us got separated from the group. So we're in Japan, separated, and can't read the language, can't read the road signs. So and I tell these kids, your life is going to be so scary if you don't have the opportunity to learn to read very well. That was just a wonderful experience. And the people that I met it was just really good. And anytime you can put on the USA sweat, that's just phenomenal. I mean, that is just so special. And when I break those out for the students from time to time, that's pretty special.
Yeah. You're in the Edinboro Hall of Fame. That probably wasn't a surprise, but also in the NCAA Hall of Fame. What do you remember about hearing about that, or was that unexpected, expected?
That was a really unexpected. The banquet was outside of Pittsburgh, and it was really cool because they included all the athletes the night before the national championship. So you had a really cool captive audience that hopefully that they were listening to some of the experiences that you had as a student athlete that they could possibly use. And I talked about learning how to begin with the end in mind and to set goals and to design programs in your own life that allow you to achieve those goals, whether they're business goals or whether they're personal relationship goals, whatever they may be. But there were a lot of people in that banquet. I think there were 500 people with the student athletes and everybody. That was just a really cool. But most importantly, my parents were there. My kids were there. So that was really neat for my boys to see that. And my one boy ended up being a state champion in the 3,200 meter. So it was really cool. He had long hair, big dreads. It's all good.
You have had this career in education and administration, influencing a lot of kids. What about as a father of an athlete, your sense of competition? Does that skip a generation? Does that go in? How competitive was your son? How were you as a observer?
That's a tricky one. That's a really tricky one. I've got two boys, Lucas and Alex, and I have a daughter. You just want them to be happy, period. But they did run cross country in middle school. And I remember my oldest, Alex, he ran cross country in 7th grade. And there was another kid, Jake, and I watched this race. I could see there was a point in the race where he didn't want to lose him. And so you can't teach that. When somebody bangs a couple of gears to stay with them, even though that kid was a better runner at the time, I knew right then, I said, well, if he wants to be a runner, he's got that gear. And it turned out that way. But it took a lot because our program here had a legendary coach, Ted Miller. He coached here for 50 years. I don't know how many state champions. And it took a coach like that to get my son to run to the level that he did. And he too was an alternate his sophomore year. And he said to me at the state meet, I won't be watching next year. And he was fifth. And then he was third. And then he did really well. But it was hard to, what do you know as a parent? Not much. So
Yeah, and with the passage of time and its great memories, you kept those relationships with your teammates and people afterwards. Even your record may never be broken with winning margin at the national championship. Would you love to see that broken? There was a breakaway this year in the Division I, but that's an unlikely thing. Maybe the weather was a big factor. It was a sweet spot of everything for you. But how would you feel as records fall? What do you think about that?
and I do agree. I mean, I was probably the best conditioned to run in that kind of environment, right? It certainly wasn't the boys from Cal Poly SLO. I remember the conversations I was overhearing at the line about this shouldn't even be happening. This is ridiculous. They shouldn't have even raced then. If you've got that mindset, it's not going to work for you. I look back at my own log from time to time and just think how insane some of the things that we did. And it all changes. But over time, I would love the record to be broken only because it would involve people being involved in the sport. And I do worry about numbers. I worry about kids not being as active, spending way too much on screen time and all the social media. And I sound like that old guy. Even when I did a little bit of coaching in middle school, because we just didn't have a coach until my superintendent told me that you can't coach as an administrator, but whatever. But I remember telling them, I don't want to see any earbuds. I don't want to see any of that stuff, because we grew up in the 70s when we were running. It was really that whole zen of running. It was that take in your environment, be aware of the wind blowing and the smells and the sights and the sounds. And to this day, I can hear a dog chain running, rattling like half a mile. I do a lot of cycling now, and people say, aren't you worried about being on the roads? Well, that transfer of skills from running all those miles really comes in. It's just faster, but the movement's good. And so I hope the record gets broke. And I hope people continue to find the joy in the lifelong sport of cross country and running and cycling. You just got to get out and move. We just don't do it. Good for you. Get outside and play. From this time to this time, you need to go out and play. You need to be involved with social interaction. As parents, sometimes want to push the easy button and say, go here, do this. Or sometimes in the school setting, when they are not coming to school or when they're having a discipline problem, we're just going to cyber school. The research is all over the place with that. It doesn't work, right? And we see them a year or 2 years later, and now they come back and their skills are even more diminished. It's just a vicious cycle. It's hard work being a parent. It's a tough job, especially in this day and age.
Oh, where was going on with you during COVID and education in that corner of Pennsylvania?
March 13th, 2020. It's Friday. I was at the middle school still as the principal. I had a really, really talented co-principal that was working with me at the time and who was very technologically savvy and had really laid a lot of positive groundwork so that when we had to make the transition to this type of environment, we were pretty good. We were certainly not any way, shape, or form distinguished. However, we had the kids with a Chromebook at home, and we had Google Classrooms already all set up, so we could kind of make a run at it. Brutal. I mean, the finish of that year was really crazy. And I was just talking about it the other day because that's 4 years ago already.
Yeah. Does it seem like a long time, or does it seem like 4 years went fast?
Both. In some aspects, it seems like, I've kind of suppressed that memory because it's not a very positive one. And then the whole following year was equally as brutal because all of the limitations were in place. So we had to build a whole new school around 6-foot distancing and all of the things that go along with things that we've already forgotten about. Right. And we're going to laugh about them in 20 years. Oh yeah. Remember when everybody had to wear the mask and since we had the kids outside till November eating lunch on painted spots on the sidewalk so we could be 6 foot apart from one another. What?
Yeah.
It was insane. I was 60 when I retired. I probably would have taught a couple more years, but it really took a lot of fun out of it. It was brutal on the teachers. And I felt helpless in trying to figure out how can I make this better for them? It was very debilitating emotionally for teachers. They're getting back to a good spot now, but the reality of it's been a long haul. But I was glad I was there when it all happened. It was, I think, really good for the teachers and the students to see someone who's kind of been a pillar at the middle school. Well, he's not running and hiding. I use this term all the time. It's just like race day. We got to pull up our tent. Oh no, let's go. We got to come up with a plan. So those things that I learned running competitively all those years, oh my gosh, they're perfect for what this job involves. It's race day every day.
That's great.
Which is awesome. And people don't know this stuff that I just shared with you. For the most part, they know that I ran. I don't think they have any idea. For the most part, kids will look me up and they'll see that steeplechase with the long hair. Mr. Barry, I saw it. Gosh, what happened? I'm not 20. But the education thing, I've really been fortunate to go into a field where your passion and your competitiveness can be really channeled to a good direction.
It's been great catching up with you and getting these stories from following your career and the inspiration you've had a chance to carry on for decades, and your insight into what running from 50 years ago from the 70s has informed your life and made a difference. It's just great stories.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've gotten into cycling and not competitively, but I like to do long rides. So I'm going on one in 2 weeks in the Greater Allegheny Passage goes from Pittsburgh to Cumberland, Maryland. And then from Cumberland, Maryland, you pick up the Chesapeake in Ohio and it goes all the way to DC. I did that ride once, right after I retired. So this time I don't have time to do the whole thing. So I'm going golfing with my brother in a group down by State College. Then he's going to drop me off at Hancock, Maryland. It's about 220 miles back. So I have this Instagram account that I've created so that I can share my experience with my K-1-2 kids. Or my IT guy's going to screen grab it and share with the teachers so that they can follow me. People say, do you listen to earbuds on the trail? The only technology will be my Garmin 830 Edge. Well, it tells you everything I need to know. Well, what do you think about the whole time? And I said, everything. You think about everything. So, yeah, it's all good.
Wow. Thanks for all your time, Greg. It's been really good. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a pleasure, Matt. Oh my gosh, what a great day. Thank you very
All
much.
right.
You have a great day, brother.
All right. Thanks.
Take
Bye-bye.
it easy. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.